because we got to go out with our friends Lita Ford, Tesla, Slaughter, Winger, Warrant, and we're going to be doing a lot more of that coming up in 2024. If you guys are going to bring like 300 of your closest friends to every show, we do. We hope so. But you know what's going on? The world has been so crazy, you guys, hasn't it? It's been just a Fellini movie. Absolutely insane. And what we have found on our end is people want their memories. They want to be reminded of a time when everybody in the world felt 10 feet tall and bulletproof and spandex was still a privilege and not a right. And it's awfully nice to play to an audience that does not look like a doctor's convention. Correct! Nah, we're all fearless, we're all rockers, we've been through it before, back in the day. No such thing as cell phones back then, when MTV actually played music videos. It wasn't all a game show, was it? You know the cool thing about not having cell phones, you couldn't be tracked. Right? No cameras everywhere, right? There was plausible deniability. You could get away with murder. That's right. It wasn't me, it was my twin. I wasn't there, honey. You could tell your parents back then, oh, I'm spending my night at Michelle's house. You weren't at Michelle's house, you were at the frat party. Yeah, you know, cell phones came in and screwed everything up. Everything got formatted. Love grunge and all that stuff, but for 8 years no one played guitar solos. They just felt entitled and stared at their shoes. And if you weren't from Seattle, you weren't getting airplay. And all of our friends that we grew up with, like those people that I mentioned, you know, they kind of found themselves in a position where they weren't getting any airplay anymore. They weren't getting any video play or anything like that. And that's amazing. It's taken 3 decades to get back here. Yeah, it's amazing. We kind of went full circle. You know, Gunnar and I started out, we were about, he was 6 when he got his first drum set. I was 7 when I got my first bass guitar. We were a little duo, like a rhythm section. We played nightclubs in Los Angeles, California from the time we were 12. There's a place there called Madame Wong's, and it was famous for launching bands like the Motels, the Knack, all those the bands. We were very young playing in those. We had to be escorted into the club. We'd play for people that were over 21 years of age because our friends couldn't make it in there because it was illegal. And then they would hustle them out. And so Gunnar and I, that's kind of where we cut our teeth. We didn't know for a couple of years that was the place to play. It was Madame Wong's. We didn't know until much later when we were taking the freight elevator upstairs to play the coveted spot at the main stage upstairs when Esther Wong, we called her the Dragon Lady. You could look her up. She was real. She owned this place, and she would always audition every single band that played there. And we didn't know until we got in this elevator with Esther to make it up for sound check. We said, boy, this is a really big elevator. She said, yeah, that's where they used to keep the bodies. It turned out that it was a funeral home before it was. So when you died at Madame Wong's, you really died at Madame Wong's, right? But Gunnar and I went back to the drawing board after playing years of club dates and learned how to write songs. And ironic enough, even though we came from a show business family, anybody remember Ricky Nelson, our dad? Anybody remember Ozzie and Harriet? Yeah, Gunnar and I for the last few years have done a show for our pop called Ricky Nelson Remembered and kind of been bearing the torch for the whole family. But our dad and our grandparents were all about what we were doing, which was really kind of nice. They kind of stood back and let us find our way. And we never quit. And that was, I guess, the biggest Nelson legacy, the biggest message we got was to never quit. And exactly how you're seeing us right now is how we wound up breaking our music, was 2 guys and 2 acoustics. And it's how we wrote songs. It's how we got our first record deal with Geffen Records, a guy there named John Kolodner. He found little bands like, I don't know, I think he put Whitesnake together. Who else? He discovered AC/DC, that was one of his signings. Foreigner, that was one of his. Just a couple small bands. Right. And so he looked at us as kind of like hard rock folkies. And he was kind of right, because we grew up in the Southern California Laurel Canyon scene with our dad and his Stone Canyon band, and people would stop by, people like Jackson Browne and Joni Mitchell and some guy with crazy hair we couldn't get rid of named Bob Dylan. You know, they were hanging out at the house. That was we did have it. We say this in our Ricky Nelson Remembered set. We had a very interesting childhood, and it's really true. But when we actually hit the music scene, and our first single dropped in 1990, we, admittedly, guys, we were a lot. We understand. We do. I mean, we look like hot Swedish chicks. We get it. You know? I mean, seriously, it was an amazing time in music, but for the 2 of us to come along, everything else that was contemporary in the day, for the most part, with some really notable exceptions, we were 2 of them, really came from a very strong blues background, when you think about musically speaking. And it's wonderful music. I love it. But when you're Guns N' Roses and you're playing from a blues background, it's pretty easy to sound tough because that's the nature of the blues. The blues is all minor keyed and it's all energy and aggression. And the two of us growing up in Southern California with our dad's Stone Canyon Band around us and Linda Ronstadt and all those people at the Troubadour, we grew up pretty much as those Southern California folkies, and we were trying to make our way in 1990 on the radio at the same time as everybody else. Now the problem was that Milli Vanilli broke. Right before we launched our first album, and here comes Milli Vanilla. So the only way that we could prove it was real. The record is this way. The record company wouldn't give us any money to promote, but they sent us on a journey through the United States with the goal being eventually it'll catch fire. And we went to the tiny little radio stations just like you see it. We woke up at 5 o'clock every morning, was on morning drive. You know, it's not very easy. Good thing we were young to sing at 6 o'clock in the morning live on the radio. It's not necessarily tarring a hot roof in the middle of summer, but it's not the easiest thing to do still. So waking up and sounding like you've been up for hours and having a personality, which is difficult for me anyways, and trying to sound like... By the way, good twin, evil twin, okay? Just so we get that straight. Now, the thing that Gunnar and I learned, and we'll get to playing some more music, is that we needed, and everybody needs, a hit song. And when you start out and you're breaking a band in the big times, you know, when your competition isn't the guys that are playing at the club that you're playing, it's who's on the Billboard top 10. That's when everything raises. And everybody asks, did you guys get a lot of advice from your dad? The only advice he really gave us, beyond don't lose your sense of humor, you're gonna need it, was learn how to write songs. And then he took a step back. And Gunnar and I were fortunate enough to really find a mentor in a record producer named John Boylan. If you see the Eagles documentary they did, the multi-part thing, he's in that quite a bit because he put the Eagles together to back up Linda Ronstadt originally, and also helped our dad form his Stone Canyon Band, which was the second phase in the garden party year of his career. But he was all about writing songs, and he put it to us this way. He said, listen, nobody's going to give you their big hit songs. You're either going to have to do a cover and reimagine it, or you're going to have to learn really how to write a hit song. And that started us off with collaborations and writing with a lot of hit songwriters, and we learned the craft. And when our first album came out, we were fortunate. We always thought that, you know, that everybody's going to release a song, it's going to be all over MTV, and which was a big thing at the time, and you have a hit record. We didn't know that our first single was going to go #1. We thought every record does that. It doesn't. But it was nice to basically start and finish this way, acoustic with two voices, and well, let's be hopefully honest, with a sound system. Let's be honest. Look, not only the way our image was, but coming from the family we came from, Matthew and I were always considered guilty until proven innocent. We just were. Everybody sees us come and they go, "Oh, trust fund kids. This is a hobby." And you know, it wasn't our job to school people in the reality of that. But I will tell you something. Music is something that we share with each and every one of you.